Hey there, Janae with Palin Projects here, and we're out in the garden today, and I just wanted to kind of talk to you about 5 lessons I learned from last year. We did an in-ground garden last year, brand new, tilled it up, took away the topsoil and basically the seeds, and planted what you see behind me. My number one lesson that I basically learned last year was, in fact, getting your water infrastructure in before you start planting. We did I don't know if you can see that sun is kind of there, but we did an overhead watering system for the majority of the year. I wanted to do drip tubing, but with everything that happened last year, we just didn't get to the drip tubing in time. We did with our corn patch, and our corn patch is back over here, and we can go and tour it, but we didn't get to our corn patch in time, or we got to the corn patch, but we didn't get to the tomatoes in time, and I think that greatly affected our tomato harvest. And then I had planted zinnias, kohlrabis, and some other things in this area that just didn't fare as well as what they probably could have if they were on drip system. Drip system, I feel, makes a world of difference, and I really saw it last year in my tomato plants. The next item we did get set up, you can kind of see it, we'll move you a little bit, it was our trellising system. So the trellising system that we used last year were hog panels. It's shorter on the bottom with a little bit wider spaces on top, and then I basically tied the tomatoes to them or weaved the tomatoes in and out as they grew. We attached the hog panels to T-posts with metal wire. I think it went well for as many tomatoes as I had. So I had 20 tomatoes per side, and then I had 4 rows of tomatoes. So, I had 80 tomatoes last year, and I didn't have to cage a single one because we did this trellising system. I would highly recommend the trellising system. We did do one where we bowed the hog panel. It was a cattle panel, actually. They're different. Cattle panels aren't smaller on the bottom, but we did bow the cattle panel, and that made a good trellis system for like our vining crops, for peas, gourds, squashes, stuff like that. So highly recommend that avenue for trellising. The next item would be your soil structure. So I thought we could get around the fact that we have rocky soil here, and I figured we could just till and pick rock. I picked rock, let me tell you. Every morning, every night, I was out here either hand picking with my cart, or I have a little rock picker that my neighbor gave us, and we just, every spare moment we had, we picked rock. And the soil still compacted, and it wasn't to the best of the ability that I think that a raised bed will be for us. And so that's why we're shifting mentalities and going the raised bed avenue. Know your seeds. So something that caught me last year was the fact that I started so many seeds, and some seeds I probably shouldn't have. So I started pumpkin seeds and squash seeds in the house, and then planted them out once it got warm enough. I direct sowed some pumpkin sweet seeds in our back row, and the production on those were night and day. Now, the ones in our back row were in a very high quality of soil because we filled that back row with a 50-50 mix, where in the ground here it was just basically ground soil and wasn't to the best of the ability that I think soil could have been for them. But I still think transplanting those seeds out into our garden stunted their growth and didn't provide the size of pumpkins and squash that I felt that they could have. So, difference in pumpkins, it was this big compared to the pumpkins you would buy in the store. were the ones that we got in the back row, whereas we got the little tiny ones out of this garden. And I planted the seeds in the back row significantly later. I would say 2 months, if not more, later than what we planted the seeds in this garden. It would have been interesting to see if I would have directly sowed pumpkin and squash seeds rather than transplanting, how the produce would have been different. And again, the produce in this area was overhead watered, and I think that had an effect. We experienced some powdery mildew as well. The last item that I have on my list is making sure that your garden is fenced off from pests. We weren't able to free range our chickens last summer because we had this garden and I knew the chickens would get into this garden. Now, we did let them out a couple times and they did. They ate some of my tomatoes. By the end of the garden year or the growing season, I was okay with that. I just let them out and basically have at it at my tomatoes and my plants. It was food for them. We didn't get to harvest it. And I was kind of bummed about that, but at the same time, I enjoy a free-ranged egg. It wasn't a bad deal that they didn't get to free range, but at the same time, like, I feel like my animals should free range, and they're out right now. So I'll show you them in a little bit. So definitely having a fence around your garden area, not just to be able to free range my birds, but to keep pests out. So we did experience some deer pressure and some turkey pressure. We have wild turkeys in our area, so they would come in and pretty much decimate anything that they saw fit. So I had some broccoli and some Brussels sprouts. They loved it. I'm glad I could produce food for the wild animals, but that's our fault. We didn't have a fence around our garden area. We do have a fence around our pasture area, and that's what this is. This is what we call it, is our pasture area. But the turkeys and the deer just jumped the fence. So I did find some natural ways to get rid of those pests, and we'll be talking about those in another video. So a bonus item that I learned last year, I didn't necessarily do in years past with my tomatoes, were pruning. And then thinning as well. Like, we didn't thin our kohlrabies fast enough or our carrots fast enough. And I think that had an issue on production as well. But something that I found to work tremendously was pruning my tomatoes. So getting that runner that's in between two regular branches, it really, to me, showed a significant difference in tomato production than in years past. So I would definitely recommend getting that sucker and plucking it off or pruning it off. You feel bad in the beginning because you're taking away a viable stem, but I had bigger tomatoes and more tomatoes this year with that kind of a pruning style than I have in the past. I also brought the leaves up, so I pruned off of the bottom about 6 to 9 inches. And so, we didn't have the pest pressure from the ground pests, the mealy bugs and centipedes and stuff like that. I didn't see as much of a pressure on. Now, I did see a little bit of pest pressure on them, and I would be curious to see what that was, if it was from the turkeys or if it was a legitimate pest that came through. I'm not sure at this point, but that's something that I'm going to watch in greater detail next year. So, other than that, I learned a lot of lessons last year. Again, like I said, we are going with a raised garden bed approach this year rather than an in-ground garden, because I feel with our soil structure, I feel like our soil has really good nutrients. I just can't get to them because of the amount of rocks and the fact that this has been a pasture for the many years that this has been a house and before. And so, the soil structure might not be as good as what I think it is. I could run a soil test. You can get those from your local county extension agent. But I am just choosing to do a raised bed garden and fill it with soil that I know is good and has good nutrients, and then amending that soil, adding fertilizer, and going about my garden that way. I think that's going to be the easiest option. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye!